Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for Feed My Sheep. With me, I have my guest, Peter Nicotra. He is part of Grace Baptist Church in Woodhaven, New York. Hey, Pete, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, brother?
Doing good. Peter and I have been friends for a long time. We shared an office for about 5 years, an office that was not too much larger than a closet. So Peter and I have become very close. I learned a lot about church planting from watching this man plant a church. And I know what I know from the Word in large part because of what conversations I had with Peter for 5 years. So, Peter, I'm really thankful for you and thankful for your ministry and thankful to talk with you today.
Well, you're a blessing, brother, and you've been a very great encouragement to me in so many ways. Your work ethic, your what's the word? Stick-to-itiveness. You don't give up, and so, and you're very casual. Take it as it comes kind of way about you, which is very encouraging.
Well, it only seems like that because I'm not from New York and I live in New York. But I do have some questions for you.
Sure.
I know that recently you preached through Psalm 37, and I want to just talk a little bit about that. First, how is your church doing during the midst of this pandemic?
Well, I mean, we're a few people have come down with the virus. A few others are pretty sick right now and don't know if they have it or not. We had a lady just a few days ago. She has pneumonia, so she probably has it. They wouldn't even give her the test. They sent her home, and so we're learning more and more people are not feeling so well, and so but two definitely do have it. A few others maybe, and a few others aren't feeling too good. So we're praying. We're getting together like you guys are, I guess, through Facebook, through Zoom, those kind of mediums. We're trying to keep a regular schedule of prayer times and service meeting and all that kind of thing. Even tonight we'll have an evangelism training. So Monday night was our night to go out and share the gospel, and so we'll do a training time tonight. Bible studies Tuesday, whatever. So we're trying to keep a pattern. One thing we did do the other night, which I thought was really very encouraging, we just had a time for we called it the Grace Baptist Church, gab time. We just got together and gabbed for like an hour on Zoom, and it might have been like 30 people on there. It was encouraged just to talk to people. I don't really get to see them. So, we're trusting the Lord.
Very good, very good. Well, I do know you're one of the most evangelistic people that I know, on the streets all the time, taking your church members out to the mall, Queens Center Mall, or Lefferts and Liberty, and doing outreach evangelism, tract distribution, street preaching, and obviously all of that has changed. So tell me a little bit more about that training that you're doing for your people. What is that like?
So our other elder, Phil Sessa, he's very evangelistic as well, and so he's going over some just technical things. Obviously through the Word, when we see every Christian should share their faith in whatever sphere that God has put them in, but you have to want to do it. And then there's how to do it, how to start a conversation, to brush up on knowing the gospel, how to reply to questions, and half the battle I think is just having a conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
Just saying hello, just maybe even giving a tract is a tremendous step.
Do you find that it's more difficult lately to do that because of these?
Sometimes, yeah, but listen, we're a bunch of sovereignty of God guys. We believe God is sovereign in salvation, and so He has an elect out there, and He's gonna draw them, and He might use something like a conversation on the street or a tract, or we've had people saved. They took a tract, and a year later, one lady, she took a tract on the street, brought it home, threw it on a dresser, left it there for a year. A year later, picked it up, came to the church, and God saved her.
Amen.
So, you don't know. You just don't know.
Well, I do want to talk a little bit through Psalm 37. I know you preached through that recently, and the title of your sermon is Do Not Fret. And it was written, of course, by David. What was David fretting about in that text?
Well, we don't exactly know. what he was fretting about, but certainly he had many things in his life that he did have to fret about, whether he was on the run from Saul for probably 4 years or so or more, or during his time of king, Absalom trying to take the throne, and all through the Psalms you see, like in some of his Psalms anyway, there's always evildoers, those who are seeking him harm, and we don't always know when they were. Sometimes we do. Sometimes the intro will tell us, but oftentimes we don't. But he had enemies. I mean, anybody who's king has probably got enemies.
Well, we do know that that there is a call not to fret, and it seems like that is resolved in large part in verses 3 through 8. And I just want to read that a little bit and then hear some of what you have to say. He says, "Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will act. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light, and your justice as the noonday. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not yourself over the one who prospers in his way, over the man who carries out evil devices. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself, it tends only to evil." Right. So that seems to be the answer to the question why we shouldn't fret. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, before you get there, I mean, the reason he says not to fret in the beginning, and he says it 3 times, by the way, in those first 8 verses, don't fret. And the reason why is because we do fret. Fret means to be angry. It means to be upset, to get hot. And then he also says, don't envy. Don't fret, don't envy. And they kind of go together. And so he sets it up. There is a problem. We have the problem. He knows what it was like to fret over evildoers and even to envy at times. But he gives us the cure. And the cure is in the verbs: trust, dwell, feed, delight, commit, rest. Those are the cure. And there's a reason they're in the order they're in. And I know that usually if there's a list of things, the first one in that list usually is what anchors the rest in the list. And if the first one isn't real or true or happening, then the others on the list won't happen either. So it's like, the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit. If you're not poor in spirit, if you don't see yourself as nothing, if you're not, there's not a poverty of self right there, then there won't be a meekness, there won't be a hungering and thirsting for, there just won't be any of those other things. So there needs to, the first one it anchors on. So the first one is trust in the Lord. If you're not trusting in the Lord, you won't be dwelling in the land and feeding and delighting. And so it starts with trust. And what does trust mean? It's the trust that the Lord's in control. It's the trust that you're secure in him, confidence that he's doing the right thing. That he's using even the wicked. He's using even the wicked and even their evil deeds to advance his kingdom. Trust that he's in control of it. That trust that every word that he has said is true. That what goes on is not beyond him. He's in control of it. Trust that what he has promised you, he will fulfill. So it starts with trust. It starts with trust. And he says, do good. And do good, means do those things which benefit men and please God. And it's not that we do good to gain favor with God, is of course, but we were created for good works. Our Christianity comes out in how we live. And so we were created to do good. We're commanded to do good. You can't read the book of Titus and know that we're not commanded to do good. We're to be zealous for good works. We're to maintain good works. And so we're to do good. And then what does he say after that? He says, dwell. And dwell, what he means there is, dwell where he's put you. Do what he's given you to do. Be satisfied in what he's given you. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Ecclesiastes. It's good to do your work, eat, and enjoy what he's given you. Don't worry about what the other guy has, what the other guy's doing. Just stay where you are, do what he's given you to do, and be satisfied with those things. And then he says, he says, feed, and that goes with dwelling, feed on him and what he's given you. And then the big one, I think that's a massive mistake is or massive abuse, and you can tell me how you feel about this, where he says, delight in the Lord, and he'll give you the desire of your heart.
This is definitely the most well-known verse in the chapter. It's quoted often, and I think you're right in a lot of inappropriate ways. Certainly there are folks who, even believers, who often misunderstand it. Can you just share the main way that you see this being misused or misunderstood?
Yeah, so they basically, the thinking is, basically if you ask for something, he'll give you something. If you, it's kind of like the name it, claim it. I want it. Lord, help me with this. Please give this to me, and then he'll give it to you because you're his son, you're his daughter. But the big mistake is they kind of don't look at the first part of the verse, where it's delight yourself in the Lord, and that's the key to it all. What does it mean to delight yourself in the Lord? And if you understand that, then you understand the second part of it, which is he will give you the desire of your heart. So if you're delighting in him, that means you're delighting in his word, in his ways, in his law, and you're taking pleasure in living in a way that brings him honor and glory. So when you boil it down, if you're delighting in him, if you're delighting in the Lord, then you'll want to live in a way that pleases the Lord. And then if you're living in a way that pleases the Lord, he's going to give you what you want because that's what he wants.
Yeah. I do think one of the ways that I have explained this to people who disagree very strongly with our point of view, and that they would be more on the kind of name it, claim it side of things, for lack of a better term. One of the ways that I've explained it is, there are some people who want to kill other people. There are some people who want to have an affair with somebody. Is God a good God who is by his very nature holy going to give them a desire that is sinful? And of course they would answer no.
Right.
And they would say, but anything that's morally neutral or morally good, if they desire it, then God would give it. And I would say, well, how do you know what is best for you?
Right.
Isn't it clear that God knew what was best for Daniel, and that was to be thrown in the lion's den? God knew what was best for the apostles, and that was to be executed, most of them. How do you know what's best for you? And they just don't have an answer. So I do think you're right.
Yeah, but I mean, Paul thought the best thing for him was to have the thorn in the flesh taken away.
Yep.
And God said, no, it's good for you. It'll keep you humble. And then Paul says, well, I'll glory in my afflictions. If this is what's best for me, then I glory in it. So listen to these few verses. I mean, Jesus said it in John 15. If you abide in me, there's the qualifier. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you. So now you're in him, his words. You're living his words. You will ask what you desire, and it shall be done for you, because your desire is going to be his desire, and you're going to grow in your desire being his desire.
Do you think this is the result can be a deep lack of trust in the Lord if people believe this verse as in God will give me whatever I ask for, and then they keep asking and asking and asking for something and don't receive it because they're asking for something the Lord does not desire to give to them? Do you think that can cause cause trouble for the believer in their soul?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, if they don't really see God as sovereign, if you believe God is sovereign, and if you really believe Romans 8:28, all things work together for good, then you trust that an all-wise God who's much wiser than we are knows what's best for us. I mean, we can't see 5 minutes from now. He sees the end from the beginning, and so he knows what's best for us. He's doing what's best for us. What's best for us may be pain and suffering to draw us closer to him, to wean us off of us, so to speak.
Well, in light of that, how would you suggest people pray with this verse in mind regarding the coronavirus?
Well, I think first of all, I think what Martin Luther said was, he said, he prayed, Lord, if you want this plague to find me, it'll find me. But if not, keep me from it. And so, it's if it's his will, and I don't think anybody was looking for it. We certainly, pray for grace to heal if we have it, grace to sustain if it comes our way, grace for never, to keep us from it. But at the end of the day, if it's his will, then that we would even glorify him and however he gives it to us, But again, we need to be wise. We don't look for pain and suffering. I mean, who does? We don't look for persecution. And yet, if it comes our way, then we know that he's allowed it to come our way. He's even ordained it to come our way. And we just trust him in that, and that should draw us closer, not further away from him. But again, if you have a skewed view of his sovereignty, I think you have, it'll be easier to flounder and struggle if you don't really see him as in control of it, and so that's been a tremendous help to me just in my Christian life, is understanding that he's sovereign. He's sovereign in sickness. He's sovereign in, financial troubles. He's sovereign in every aspect of our lives.
Well, as this psalm goes forward, I think David kind of suggests that we need to give ourselves over to God's way, to acknowledge that whatever God's plan for our lives is better than our own. In that, he says, "Commit your way to the Lord."
Yeah.
And how do we do that? What does that look like?
Well, you see, when he says, it's interesting because the word commit actually means to roll away, and it means to roll something away from you. And in this context, it's to roll your burdens or your fretting or your envy away from you, whatever that trouble is, and roll it onto the Lord. So it's 1 Peter 5, cast your cares upon him, for he cares for you. It's, Lord, I don't like it. I don't understand it. It's hard. It's heavy. Please help me with this. Please take away this. And all in the context of fretting and envy. That's the psalm, right? And so, you see the wicked prosper. You see evil going on and nothing happens. God doesn't strike them dead for doing what they do. And you're troubled. You're troubled. And of course you can apply it to the, the physical stuff, and like the virus now. But you're troubled and you have to roll it away from you and just roll it onto him. He's in control. He's sovereign, and you're trusting that he's in control, that he'll deal with it, when he wants to deal with it. Maybe now, certainly later.
Down in verse 7, it says, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him." And that, I think, seems to apply very much to our situation now in a variety of ways. I mean,
right.
What would you say to that in regards to our current
trial? Well, the word rest, he says, when he says be still or rest, it means to be silent. Be silent, which means to listen to the Lord. Like, stop speaking, let him talk to you. Stop you panicking or whatever's going on, and listen, take in the word. Concerning the virus, there's a lot of panic. And we just have to, listen to the promises of God. He's never going to do anything, to hurt us. He won't abandon us. Every one of our days are already marked out, right? There's a time to be born, a time to die, and every one of our days we're in his hands. He's not going to leave us. He won't in any way, separate his love from us. So those are promises that are not going to end. And they should be really, very helpful to us. Also, we ought not to feel like the world fears, because if it's not the coronavirus, then it's stage 4 cancer, then it's, liver shutdown, then it's getting hit by a bus or whatever, but our days are numbered. And so at some point, like, this life is not the end all for us. And we have to constantly be having like an upward mind, or a heavenly view, which is where we're bound towards. And, we want to live good here. We want to live good for him here. We want to, we pray for strength that we could use it for him and redeem the time for him. But, again, I think that, we have to just take in the truths of the word of God and the promises of the word of God, and then anchor on those, and not become so entrenched in this, we lose hope of what's to come. We lose sight of that.
Well, I do have a question regarding verse 11 for you. I think this is probably the most interesting New Testament connection that we have here.
Yeah.
He says, "But the meek shall inherit the land and delight themselves in abundant peace." Now, clearly, this is probably what Jesus was referencing when he says that the meek shall inherit the earth. What does that mean, and how in the world should we understand this inheritance?
Yeah, well, and so some commentators would take this as, literally, Israel, or some would say, like we have it now. I don't think I think that's really way too small. And I think what Jesus was saying in Matthew 5 and what David is saying here is the new earth. Is the new Jerusalem. Where heaven comes down and there's a new heaven and a new earth, and we inherit it. And I don't think like we inherit a land, but we inherit eternal life with Christ. And I think ultimately, because there are lots of, we inherit righteousness, we're told, the inheritance of the saints. Ephesians says that we're Jesus' inheritance, and He's our inheritance. And so I think at the end of the day, I think what it really means, if I were to boil it down, is that we're with Christ in an eternal glorified state forever, and we're with Him. And I think He's the prize, He's the reward, He's the goal. And I think that's what it means. I know it's very simplified, but I don't think it's a physical land.
Yeah.
The here and now.
And in that regard, in what way are we called to be meek? And what exactly is why is that here? How does that relate to the rest of this chapter?
Well, I mean, again, like the meek don't fret. The meek don't envy. The meek trust that their life is in God's hands. The meek see themselves, totally dependent upon God. They're sold out in their heart and soul to Him. It's about the King and the kingdom, and not about them. And so we should be growing in the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes are the character of the Christian. So the moment you're saved, the moment you're regenerated, you now have a new nature, and with that new nature comes a new character. And so we're all of those. Every Christian has to be all of those. Virtues, if you will, or those Beatitudes. But we should be growing in them. We should be growing in meekness. We should be growing in poverty of spirit, growing in hungering and thirsting for righteousness, growing in being a peacemaker. And it's us. Like we're it. That should be that must be us, because that's our new nature now. And so we're growing in that. And that's would be true for meekness as well. So it's just a handing over life to Christ and trusting Him. And again, in the context of the Psalm, it's the worrying, it's the anger, it's the envy, and the meek hand it over to the Lord, like they roll it over to Him. All right. So we battle because we're still in the flesh, but when we battle, we have to remember who we are.
Yeah. I do think oftentimes we use the phrase meekness is power under control.
Yes.
And I think we still tend to use that phrase as though we have the power. But I think usually the time when meekness comes into play the most is when we are being oppressed or treated poorly by those who do have more power than we do. And that's when the meekness of Christ shined the brightest, when, although He was the most powerful person in this conversation with Pilate, on this earth, in terms of political power, Pilate was in charge. And we see the meekness of Jesus in that conversation. We see the meekness of Jesus as He's being crucified, when He could have called down legions of angels. Yet
72,000, I think.
Yeah. Yet he doesn't.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that it's submitting And trusting, that's what Jesus did. He trusted himself to the Lord. He submitted to the Lord's will. He didn't look for man to help him. He went to his Father. As a man, he went to his Father, and that's us too. I mean, we may have ability to do things, but we surrender it to him. And that's why Moses was like the meekest man on earth at the time, because he submitted to the will of God, to lead the people. And so, yeah, that's a wonderful promise right there. The meek shall inherit the earth. It's a massive promise, but that's not a now promise. That's a later promise, and so it's not going to happen until we, until either he comes back and takes us to him then, or we leave and then, we pass away now and then, he comes back, but even the souls in heaven are waiting for this. We see that in Revelation, how long?
Yeah. Well, it does kind of imply something future in the sense of inheritance.
Yeah.
Inheritance is intrinsically a futuristic word.
Yeah.
You wait for an event of some sort until you can receive what is coming your way. I do want to jump down here to the end, to the resolution here of Psalm 37. In verses 39 and in verse 40, David closes out by saying, "The salvation of the righteous is from the Lord. He is their stronghold in time of trouble. The Lord helps them and he delivers them. He delivers them from the wicked and saves them because they take refuge in him." And I would just love to hear your ideas here about what this says about us and says about our lives now in the midst of the coronavirus. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the salvation of the righteous is from the Lord. Well, that's what Jonah says, right? Salvation is of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And of the righteous, those who have a right standing before God. And so not only are we saved, but the fulfillment of our salvation is coming, right? Eternal life with Christ. He's our strength in a time of trouble. That doesn't mean that we're going to get out of trouble. It just means that he helps us through the trouble. It doesn't mean we're gonna skirt the things that come man's way. He shall help them and deliver them. He shall deliver them from the wicked and save them because they trust in him. And I don't think that means that again, I mean, people are persecuted and martyred all the time, by wicked men. But I think you go back to Matthew 10:28, and he says, listen, don't fear those who can kill the body, but can't touch the soul. Rather fear him who has both body and soul into hell. And so the worst man can do to any of us is kill us. But they're just catapulting us into heaven, and so they can take our life, physical life, but even as Job said, he goes, I know that I'll see my Redeemer, standing on the earth with my eyes, I'll see him. And so, our physical death, just causes our soul to go straight to heaven, right? Absent the body, present with the Lord. Jesus said to the thief on the cross, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." So the moment we breathe our last, we go to him. And then in the end, he's going to raise our body up, and so I think that's the encouragement. That's the delivering from the wicked. The wicked can only touch the body. They cannot touch the soul. The soul is secured, and the body is going to be brought to life again. So I think in that way, because I don't think it means that that we're never going to have trouble, that people aren't going to do bad things or have wicked intentions to hurt us or rob us or or do evil. I mean, they will, and they have. So I don't think we're immune to that.
Yeah, I would fully agree that this is not saying God is going to deliver you from whatever suffering you're encountering right now.
No,
I think that's very important because if you read it without understanding it, it's going to bring discouragement if you're trusting the promise in a way that God was not promising it.
Right.
And I think that's what we see, for example, in Psalm 73 with Asaph, where his circumstances are really bad. We see in the first several verses that whatever's going on there, the wicked are definitely abusing him, but his circumstances never change throughout the course of the psalm. What
No.
does change is he says, but then I entered into
Right.
the temple of the Lord. I entered into and I saw
The
something
second.
changed in him. There was a radical difference because he encountered the Lord.
Yeah, and you see that, and think about what he saw. Right? What did he see? He saw the sacrifices for sin.
Yep.
And he realized there needs to be a sacrifice for sin. And the wicked do not have a sacrifice for sin. If they live and die that way,
Yeah.
And so it's like, and I think when I preach this, and I only preached the first 11 verses, so I didn't get to all the way, I didn't get to verse 40. But I remember like can I have it here? Yeah. I remember when I gave like 3 ways to apply the message. And one was, understanding that God's will is sovereign will keep us from fretting and anger. Understanding that his will is sovereign. Like nothing is happening outside of his sovereign control. This virus is God's virus, right? I mean, it's his virus. It didn't happen with him not aware of it. He not only allowed it, but he ordained it. And it's doing what he wants it to do, whatever he wants it to do. And so knowing his will is sovereign will keep us from fretting and anger. And that's particularly and again, the context of this psalm is those who are getting away with evil and those who are gaining riches, that would cause you to become envious of them in let's say illegal ways or not unscrupulous ways. All right. So he's sovereign. He's sovereign. He's sovereign with those who are doing wicked things, those who are prospering, in illegal ways, or like even now, like I read something the other day where there's a company that's gouging people, like charging 10 times, 20 times more for like face masks and all that kind of stuff. Like they're making money off of off of an illness, and it gets us mad. I mean, our blood boils when we see that kind of thing. And he says, listen, God is sovereign. Understanding he is sovereign will help us and keep us from fretting and keep us from fear, keep us from anger. That is righteous anger, and we should have that, but very few of us really have righteous anger, and when we do, it oftentimes turns into unrighteous anger when we let it keep going. But we, knowing he is sovereign will help us. Secondly, having an eternal perspective will help us from fretting and envy. I mean, time is short. Time is really short, and that's what he says in the psalm, by the way, in verses 2 and I think in verse I don't know, not 10 or 11, listen. Oh yeah, verse 10. For yet a little while the wicked shall be no more. Indeed, you will look carefully for his place, but he shall be no more. Why are you fretting and angering over people and envious? They're here a short time and then they're gone, and they're going to have to stand before God. And so their lives are in God's hands. He's allowed and ordained whatever's going on for his purposes, not the author of evil, but he uses it for his purposes, obviously. And his ends, and we ought to just be content with where we are, and let him deal with mankind, and he will. And their life is short. And I said in that sermon, I remember looking it up. I think it was like a 50-minute sermon. What did I say? Like there were how many people? Let's see if I can find it. Something like I don't know, like here it is. 600. So what did I say? 6,000. So 2 people die every second. So I said, since the time I started this sermon, a 50-minute sermon, 5,200 people have died. From the time I got up here, 5,200 people have died. So life is really short. It's kind of like accelerated now, and people are very aware of it now because of this virus. 17. I read yesterday or the day before, 17 people in New York City are dying every hour, and that's a lot. It's a lot for any time. But yet 150,000 die every day in the world. Like every single day, 150,000 people go into eternity. And so we have to remember that, and life is short. Even if people do wicked things to us here and now or get away with wicked things, it's short. But the third thing I said in that sermon was, instead of fretting and instead of envying, right, we should remember what their end is and have pity on them, i.e., we should pray for them. We should evangelize them. Right? Instead of being angry with people because they're wicked and do wicked things and get away with it, or envying them because they seem to make money and get rich off of doing wicked things, we should pray for them, and we should share with them if God allows us to do that. So instead of envy, pity. because you know what, many of us were very wicked and did evil things and gained wealth maybe through through uh, you know unorthodox ways or unlawful ways. So we should pity them. Anyway,
I do think that's a common refrain in the Bible, that you shouldn't envy the wicked. You should pity them because their end is destruction. And that's why I think Asaph in Psalm 73 describes the position of the wealthy person as being in a very dangerous, precarious place where God has set their foot in a slippery place. It's like being on the edge of a waterfall on a mossy rock, and he says they're looking down at their great kingdom, but he doesn't know that he's about to fall to his death. You don't look at that person and say, man, I wish I was standing there. You look at that person and say, oh, that man's going to meet a terrible end. So I think you're right on the money in terms of looking at future justice. And that gives comfort to the believer, knowing that we can either trust that God is going to give them justice by punishing them for their sin, or that God will give them justice by punishing his own son for their sin and bringing them into the kingdom, which is what we should more hope for.
Absolutely. So, absolutely. And that's the thing, is that we, if we really love our fellow man, then that's our greatest desire for them. I mean, I don't desire anybody to suffer the wrath of God. I wouldn't want that for anybody. I mean, how would we rejoice if someone who we deemed a very wicked person, came to faith? What did the first century saints think when they heard that Saul of Tarsus, became a Christian? Well, some didn't believe it. They thought it was a trick.
Yeah.
But they came to see it was real, and it just shows you the unbelievable mercy and power of God. To take a hard heart, which every heart is hard, and change it. I mean, we're not as wicked as we can be, obviously, but some of us are more wicked than others. And there's not a heart so hard that God can't change it. So we have to be persuaded that the gospel is the answer and remedy and the balm for everything. And we just got to be persuaded of that. What man needs is the gospel. And what we need is the gospel. Christians need the gospel to help us to go through the struggles like right now with this virus, or financial struggles or relational problems. It comes down to the gospel. If we're not convinced and convicted that God is in control of everything, and that Christ literally paid paid our hell on the cross, took the wrath of God for us and suffered a pounding from heaven, so that we could be pardoned and forgiven, and then adopted into the family of God and be blessed abundantly in the family of God. The problem Christians have is they think the blessings are physical, and sometimes they can be. Some people are given physical blessings, but the wicked are given physical blessings too. But our blessings are spiritual, right? Ephesians 1:3 says we have every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. And it's not money, it's not health, although you may have money and you may have health, but it's peace and joy, the fruits of the Spirit. It's the blessing of fellowship. It's communion with God. It's all of that. Like those things, you can't put a price tag on that, and the world can't have that. But we have it, and we ought to seek more of it, and it's ours to have. But if we get caught up, if we have tunnel vision of here and now, we're looking inward, it's going to get far from us.